Hi, this is 𝗲𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗀, and I'm here with my friend and fellow coach, Alison Sinclair. We decided after a whole bunch of conversations that we needed to get together and share from our journeys and from our life's work in terms of what burnout has been for us and how we traveled through to the other side with post burnout growth. So, welcome to this first episode of the Post Burnout Growth Podcast, Real Talk with Ali and me, Avril. And you're in the right place if basically you're a good girl like us in a high pressure environment and you want to hear more about what it takes to navigate the journey of burnout, but also come through with real strategies, tips, wisdom, and insight that's going to help you put in new foundations and set yourself up for a new baseline. Because, hey, we're all here to thrive and flourish, aren't we? So, over to you, Ali. Hello.
Hi, hello. Thank you for that introduction. Delighted to be here and chatting with you about this topic. It's funny how life unfolds and brings you to people in the most unexpected ways. And you could say that about us, couldn't you?
For sure. For sure.
Today, welcome everyone. As Avril said, you're here listening to us talk about post-burnout growth. Avril, tell me about that for you.
So I think first of all, I just want to kick off with sometimes there can be lots of new words and terms, and what is all of this? And do I need to Google this term before I listen to Ali and Avril? And I just wanted to share that this is a space in which we are demystifying some of the language around what you might hear or what you might come across as you sort of start to make this journey through burnout. Um, but essentially for me, post burnout growth was having gone through a huge, it was a 2 year, more than 2 year long journey with burnout. I was very unwell for very long. And essentially the reason I wanted to create this piece of work as well with you, Ali, um, was to share more transparently from what it means to have been through that journey. So that for those of you who are either feeling like you are headed that way, or you've been through burnout, or are navigating sometimes multiple cycles of it, you don't feel alone in that journey, that you don't feel that sense of isolation that many of us have come to feel. Post burnout growth is essentially, it's not, I wouldn't say it's an arrival point or a destination, but it is definitely a place that you can come into in yourself as you start to reflect more deeply on what burnout has been for you, what's specific to your circumstances, what is specific to your patterns, your life, what led you to that point, and as you make your way through in terms of your own recovery and healing. I like to call it a homecoming.
Mm,
Um, Post burnout growth is the place in which you start to pick up all of the pieces, shall I say the pieces that were left there, but also the new foundation blocks that you want to put in, the new ways in which one wants to live, the new kind of baseline. I know in resilience we talk about bouncing back, but in post burnout growth and even in post traumatic growth, we're starting to look at what's this new baseline that you're going to be coming home to. Um, so that's kind of where I wanted to kick things off, and that's part of why I was so drawn to Ali's journey as well in the conversations we've had, and in terms of also the intention of why we're creating this podcast. Ali, what about yourself? Tell me about you.
yeah. Well, firstly, thanks for sharing all that. It's good to reflect again on what brought us together in this burnout growth phase that we're sort of both navigating. I think one of the things for me is I've burned out twice and I was out of action, so to speak, for a considerably long period of time on both occasions. But at the time, I didn't actually know it was burnout. And I guess that's, a little bit of a testament to where we're at with burnout now these days, that we're actually talking about it. We're demystifying it. It's not one thing for one person. And, it really does vary. So it's probably quite easy to overlook that you might be on the path to burnout, that you are simply burnt out. And it can be quite isolating as well, because you're not really sure how to make sense of it all, because quite frankly, you're exhausted. So I think for me, looking back, I really would have welcomed, I guess, not just hearing others talk about their journey to go, oh, actually, I think this is what's happening for me.
Mm.
By way of affirmation that, I wasn't just tired from a busy work week, it was more than that. And that actually I really needed to pay myself some serious attention in terms of my well-being, my care, and just leading myself through each day appropriately, which I wasn't at the time. So loads of lessons, loads of growth and continued lessons, and just really keen to share that with other people, because so often in life we go through life thinking, oh, it's just me. It's just me. It's just happening to me. And when you sit down with others, like some of the conversations we've had, it's been like, oh my God, like, yeah, yeah. And it's comforting, of course, but it's just so validating, because you can, as I said, you can easily dismiss yourself, you can dismiss your needs, you can dismiss your feelings. And suddenly, when you open up and you're chatting and you're exploring this topic with others, you can realize you're having a very real experience, and it's something not to be ignored.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you bring up. In terms of why someone might find themselves in burnout or feel like they might be able to continue to push that feeling of exhaustion or overwhelm down, or that I want to pick up on something you shared earlier. It's a busy week, or it's this workload. I need to figure out better work-life balance. So many of the things that many of us may have tried, and there's certainly enough of self-help books and podcasts. This isn't one of them. That are, 5 ways to hack your productivity. And while a lot of these are definitely actionable tips and strategies, um, we need to have real conversations around what is the high cost and the real costs of burnout. Whether that means from an employee-employer perspective, but also in terms of the fact that it doesn't just leave you maybe feeling like you need to take the sick day or a vacation. When one is in full-blown burnout, it might affect all areas of your life. I know, Ali, you touched upon the health aspects. These are some of the things that we wanted to create more transparency, and you'll hear more about it as we start to share more conversations, bring in more guests. So there's lots more to come up. Ali, I wanted to ask you a question. I loved the language you used there, to lead yourself.
Mm.
I know you are a self-leadership coach. You're focused on mental fitness and helping your clients in that space. But just from your own journey of making it through to post-burnout growth, if you were to share, what would leading yourself mean or look like for somebody who's making this journey from burnout through to recovery and onto the other side?
Um, for me, that is a massive question. In that a number of things really um, flood into my mind. And you know, if I think about not leading myself, what was I not doing? I wasn't backing myself. Um, I was I was really candidly, my self-image, my self-esteem, my self-worth had me on the back foot, coupled with not really fully having a sense of my own strengths and capabilities, but also a sense of my own limits. And so to touch on the self-worth, which I'm sure we'll talk about more in other episodes, but burnout, in my experience, does not happen in isolation, as in it's not 100% down to the organization, whilst undoubtedly that is having a huge impact. We also have to recognize ourselves as kind of autonomous beings in the aspect of taking ownership for our own well-being, and not completely giving it over to someone else, because that can also lead to us feeling quite powerless. And if we're already feeling powerless, it's not a great move. So back to leading ourselves is about choosing ourselves first and foremost, not living life in second place.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lived my life in second place for way too long. Um, and that has probably been a massive catalyst of a realization for me that I wasn't leading myself and that I needed to change things, because not leading myself and putting myself in second place arguably contributed without doubt to my susceptibility to burning out, hence burning out twice.
Right. Thank you for that. That is so beautifully shared. And I'm sure it's going to create a lot of resonance with others who are listening to this and maybe noticing those little sparks of recognition from their own journey, whether that's happening, burnout is happening for them in the home environment, in a, in a relationship, juggling multiple priorities, or also just working in a, in an environment that might be bringing its own set of pressures. But I love what you touched upon there, that intersection of where does the individual begin or end, and where does the environment begin and end, and how one can become more aware of what's happening on the inside so they can start to lead themselves. We can lead ourselves from that place of conscious self-awareness. I love that.
What about yourself?
In terms of leading myself, I
Mm,
think for me, when I was listening to you share there as well, self-worth was a huge issue. And self-worth, it took me until burnout and coming into post-burnout growth to learn that self-worth is non-negotiable. I think
mm,
before, I don't think I'd ever heard that before. Um, and I don't share that as well as just some sort of words or language or something to, it's great to stick on a post-it note, no doubt, but it's not just a feeble mantra, but self-worth is non-negotiable. Every human being is born with it. It's innate, it's intact. And throughout a journey of social conditioning, and we will all have them, whether that's in families, cultural systems, religious environments, everything that we are exposed to and what we internalize somewhere gives us these little nudges and messages that self-worth is to be traded in for acceptance and belonging. And to that, I am forever grateful for all of the work of the fabulous Brené Brown around self-worth. But it took me until post-burnout growth to not just learn about self-worth it wasn't just some fluffy concept, but
mm,
it is the core and the essence of who I am as a human being. And that is true for every other human being. Um, but I also wanted to sort of pick up on something you shared in terms of learning what the limits are and learning that those limits are not the limits of who I am, the limits of my energy, the learning about reciprocity of energy, especially in relationships. For me, burnout came from a lot of, and we'll talk about this in future episodes and conversations as we draw on our journeys, but it did come from people pleasing and parent pleasing that is rooted way back where. Um,
mhm,
it's just that it didn't ever feel like that because there was so much of praise and recognition for, all of the outward success markers, all of that outward achievement, for always being the good girl. And I want to unpack some of the good girl behaviors as well.
mhm.
We can come to that in another episode. I'm sure that will be a fabulous other conversation. But learning to lead myself meant that I had to learn what I was in the first place, who I am at my
Mm,
core. You talked about strengths and capabilities. That was one for sure. I had never heard the word values. I didn't know what it meant. And I'm not ashamed to share that it came until I started to train as a coach that I actually heard that term in a more, I suppose, formal sense, and then began to become endlessly curious about what were those values that were mine, that I had autonomously chosen for myself. That
mm,
meant that as I'm designing a new life in post burnout growth, what is it that's really important to me? What are my, I don't want to use the word non-negotiables, but what's my North Star? What's
mm,
that guiding focus, and how am I going to not just do life, but how am I going to be with myself, and how is this going to guide my becoming as I move forward?
Mm,
So learning to lead myself has been unpacking a lot of I think it was shaky foundations to begin with. But
mm,
hey, we all start somewhere, and burnout really gave me that opportunity to, again, throwing back to what you said, the point about ownership, taking that responsibility. Where in the past, with my own journey of complex trauma, there was a considerable amount of learned helplessness, making that shift through to self-trust, making very conscious choices moment by moment in terms of, hey, what's in my control, agency. So again, I think this is just the initial sort of conversation that Ali and I are sharing in terms of, the journeys we've been on, the different things we've been talking about, but we'll start to share and unpack as we go further. So as we sort of start to close out, Ali, are there any parting words of wisdom or any one insight that you want to share with our listeners?
um, there's so many topics that you've touched upon that I'm really excited to dive into more deeply in the upcoming shows because they all deserve their own individual conversation. And I really hope that anybody who joins us today and going forwards will really find comfort, value, awareness, and clarity, and perhaps a way for you to take some time to listen to our shares and reconnect with yourself. And when I say reconnect with yourself, is so often in this, more, bigger, faster equals better world that we live in, where we're measured on our productivity. We are constantly in seeker mode. We're seeking validation. We're seeking acceptance. We're seeking acknowledgement. We're seeking belonging from others outside of us. And it keeps us literally spinning our wheels. You might want to say the hamster wheel, but it goes beyond that. It keeps us in a real sense of lack, a real sense of striving and not enoughness. And when we're so focused on others seeing us and giving us a nod, giving us a pat in the back, giving us some praise, we have typically at that point, in my experience, lost the fact that the one person that needs to see us is ourselves, not anybody else outside of us. And until we turn around and look at ourselves fully with love, we will constantly be trapped in that striving cycle, which honestly is a disservice and to ourselves. And I'm really passionate in this podcast discussions to try and instill a sense of what can you do today to honor yourself? How are you honoring yourself? How are you choosing you? How are you loving yourself? And not in a fluffy sense, but recognizing that self-care is self-leadership. And we're not talking bubble baths. We're talking truly taking the absolute bestest care of yourself. That other people look at you and go, "Oh my gosh, you really look after yourself, don't you?" And you'd be like, "Yep, because I matter. I'm important." And stop living life in second place.
That's so beautiful. That is incredibly. That could have been another name for a podcast. This is not a bubble bath.
Yeah. Sorry if I'm not trying to diss bubble baths. They're quite nice, but
Yes, they're very nice.
yeah. But they're definitely they're an elastoplast of sorts.
Yes.
What
Yes.
about your
And
good self? What's your sort of feeling and takeaways or that you want to share with those who've tuned in?
I think what you've shared so beautifully there, I'll pick up and run with it a little bit in that I lived a lot of my life, and I can definitely attribute a lot of my burnout to the sense of living outside in. what in the outside world is giving me my sense of worth, what in the outside world tells me that I am loved, belong, fit in. Um, and I think the one thing I want to sort of share from my own experience is that sense of living from the inside out. It's not a one and done. It doesn't happen overnight. But more importantly, and this is the reason I'm so passionate about doing this work with Ali and so committed to doing the work I do within the coaching sphere as well, is that if you're listening to this, you don't have to come to the end of your best energy. You don't have to be completely face to the floor with burnout. You don't have to be signed off sick, trying to figure out what is next. How did this happen to me? I understand that. I've been in that place. How did I put in all of this work? How did I hit all of these goals? How did I raise the bar and still get here? If you're listening to this, I hope that you will take away this sense of it is possible to start to create those new foundations of living from the inside out. Because, and the thing that I love and I hold on to is what you do is not who you are. What you do is part of who you are. And in everything that we're doing, whether that's at work, with our relationships, in the community, with our money, every choice we make, we choose ourselves, so we self-choose or we self-abandon. And I think that's the other thing I want to share and want to sort of start to bring through in some of our future conversations is how do we start to move that dial from the default setting of self-abandonment, of going, yeah, let me put someone else and their needs and everything else first, because that's what I've been taught to do. That's what I'm praised for. And start to shift things around a little bit, start to move into that discomfort of growth, choosing oneself, but also trusting, reinforcing trust. And that can only happen on the inside. And so, Ali, to what you just shared as well, in terms of reinforcing that sense of when you lead yourself and you make those conscious choices, how you keep coming back to that place of really grounded self-worth. Um, it's okay that there's always going to that it is a messy growth journey, but it is a growth journey nonetheless. And the cost of staying where you are, the cost of burning out, it's too high. Take it from ourselves. But we don't want you to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the only other thing that I really would like to share before we close, Avril, I hope you don't mind, it just came
Go for it.
in there, was we've talked about the word journey. And in my humble experience in this life, most people I meet, myself included, we tend to look at the word journey as having an end point, a destination, arriving. And from my self-leadership ethos and background, we never arrive. We do arrive in the sense of there's a new location.
Yeah.
So there's a new location, but there isn't an end point. And so, we can so easily get wrapped up in knots about, oh, this person's further along their journey than me. Whatever the topic is that we happen to be discussing, but I would just invite any listeners to stay open to the fact that it's a journey of many pit stops, of many different locations, and some of them are quite beautiful, even if it doesn't feel like that's possible right now. To hold on to that and keep going.
I love that. I love that. So thank you for listening to our first episode. We want to also share, in full transparency, I hope you find with me doing this, that this is, coming together for this podcast, having these conversations is also part of the growth journeying that Ali and I are each on, as coaches who work in the space and as human beings who are committed to helping and supporting others who are coming through burnout. But in full transparency, we wanted to rock up and do the quick, messy action and get started. But also as a nod to perhaps where each of us might have found ourselves, perhaps where you might find yourself, and it's sometimes feeling stuck or feeling like it's a bad day or feeling like it's a bad place might become the familiar. And sometimes it's so easy to get stuck in the familiar, and it's so easy to get stuck where we're comfortable or feel like we don't have any help And um, I was sat in my corner of the world, and Alison was sat in her corner of the world. And then we got talking, and we've been talking over a few months. And we realized that it felt like we'd known each other for so long when we had to do this. So um, yeah, this is us also sharing and also growing together in terms of showing up for you and making sure that you know that you're not alone. No one is alone and no one's isolated. So help us out there. And if nothing else, listen to us. We'll promise to bring the laughs and all the fun and joy. But yes, thank you so much for listening to us today. And thank you, Alison, for all of your beautiful words of wisdom and for getting into the arena, so to speak, with me.
Likewise. Thanks, Avril.
All right. So we'll hope that you will join us again in our next episode. And if you loved what you listened to, please definitely make sure that you add us to your list of favorites podcasts or podcasts that you're listening to on the regular. And if you know someone else who might benefit from this, or you're like, oh my gosh, I know, you've got to send this to them. So definitely share this podcast episode with them. And yeah, we'll look forward to having you back with us and listening to us the next time we get together and do a conversation. All right, bye for now.
Bye.